Okay, lovely. Thank you, Annie. I'm going to keep us going there just so that we can stick to time. So if anybody has any additional questions, if you could either pop them on the Padlet, and we will also have some time at the end of all the presentations. So now I'm going to pass on to our lucky last speaker, Amanda.
So lucky. Thank you. Hopefully you can see the slides. Thank you. So yeah, lucky last. This afternoon, I am going to talk to you about a speech pathology focus project that we're doing. And our research team, I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. Simone Howes and Dr. Samantha Siambalapitia. So I'm not going to go into this slide in very much detail at all, but the key message that I really wanted to highlight was that there is this increased likelihood that practice educators are going to have to supervise students from diverse cultural backgrounds. And we know that's the case because of the two factors that Sam mentioned earlier. So we know that international student enrolments are increasing and that the languages spoken at home other than English is also increasing in Australia. And it's really important to acknowledge that this is actually not exclusive just to our international students, but university programs across Australia have domestic students from a huge variety of cultural backgrounds, but often the literature and the data is about international students because that's where data is it's easy to draw data from. So all speech pathology university programs in Australia include a placement component, and placement in itself requires all students to adjust to the professional and organisational practices of the workplace. But what we do know is that this adjustment can be particularly hard for students from culturally diverse backgrounds because they're adapting to this different culture, plus they're required to practice in English. So the next couple of slides I have here are really just a summary of what we know so far. And most of this work has been conducted by Stacey Attrell and her colleagues. So Stacey's a speech pathologist from South Australia. And what I'm going to present on now is what do practice educators think? And then what do students from culturally and linguistically diverse populations think? So the first theme that comes up is that there is this perception that there is an increase in practice educator workload when you take on a student from a culturally diverse background. So there's an increase in workload and time and responsibility. There's that pressure to provide a positive learning experience while also maintaining a safe and quality patient experience, and also providing opportunities and time for those students to be able to demonstrate the competency that they need to pass placement. And practice educators really acknowledge this guilt around not passing a student and what it means for the students in terms of potential financial or social impacts. Some strategies that the practice educators have suggested include things like explicitly modelling and teaching, providing opportunities to practice, and written and verbal feedback. So the second theme identified in the literature is generally around the role of a student's cultural background on their competency development, but also that influence that it has on their learning style. So students are required to learn how to engage with different communication styles, cultural norms, and placement settings that might be actually very different to their own experiences. And then their cultural background is also having this impact on or influence on their learning style. So the practice educators were reporting that students from different cultures have really different ways of interacting with their supervisors. And there are these cultural barriers that may prevent them from doing things like taking the initiative, asking questions, interacting within groups, and advocating for themselves. So some of the strategies that have been identified in the literature, well, one really great one is obviously learning about the student's background, their prior learning experiences, and learning styles. However, this then feeds into the above theme, which of course, these sorts of discussions do add a layer of complexity and time for practice educators. Unsurprisingly, communication skills were perceived as critical for placement success. So speech pathology practice educators were reporting issues or challenges around the students' level of English language proficiency, whether there's a presence of an accent and its impact on their speech intelligibility, written communication skills, speed of information processing, and conversational and interpersonal skills. So there are lots of strategies for this one. Some of them include things like managing the impact of the accent, encouraging students to access university support for English language services. And then the final theme for practice educator perspectives is really around the fact that there are opportunities for it to be a mutually positive experience. And practice educators acknowledge that there are mutual benefits for supervisors and peers and patients to really have the opportunity to increase and develop their own cultural awareness. So then looking at it from the perspective of speech pathology students from diverse cultural backgrounds, students acknowledge that the relationship between the student and the practice educator is really critical, but establishing that relationship can be difficult when every practice educator has a different teaching and interprofessional communication style. And then students are also reporting challenges in really understanding and reconciling the differences that they see in their relationships with their practice educators in Australia and the previous relationships that they've had with teachers in their home countries. So some of the some of the strategies that have been identified have included, maintaining that open communication, providing really clear and transparent expectations, and regular feedback. The second theme, cultural adjustments. So for this one, international students in particular have found it really challenging to adjust to different settings and service delivery models and organisations. But on top of that, they're also adjusting to really different learning models that they felt were challenging. So things like feelings of discomfort when speaking up, perhaps the requirement to learn by doing rather than observing first. And some of the strategies that have been identified for this particular theme are around that discussion with the practice educator around cultural differences and observing and interacting with peers within the placement. The third theme, like in the practice educator, was around communication skills. And in Stacey Attrell's 2015 study, international students reported that they perceived their English skills to negatively impact their competency development and placement assessment. But also, these students were very worried that their communication skills negatively impacted on their clients. So students are focusing not only on their communication and making those adjustments and refinements, but as speech pathology students in particular, they also are required to focus on the communication abilities of the patient or the client that's in front of them. And the last theme from the perspective of the students is this learning environment, and it was perceived as critical. So what students really valued was, a thorough orientation, having that peer support, and a really structured and predictable learning environment. So where to from here? So we can kind of see from the literature so far that actually there are fairly similar strategies that have been generated from both speech pathology practice educators and students. We know that we need to avoid generic strategies and that the strategies themselves should be individualized and highlighting the students' strengths and the areas that they need to improve. And anecdotally, as one of the practice education coordinators of the speech program at Griffith, field educators, so speech pathologists, practice educators are still reporting to us that they really want more training and resources in this area. But we still have some questions. So is this information still current, and how has it changed over the past 5-10 years? We want to know how we can implement these strategies in a way that really meets the training needs of practice educators. And really, we want this to be a co-design model. So how can we use students and practice educators to develop resources and training? So our study aims to explore the experiences, challenges, and facilitators encountered by students from diverse cultural backgrounds and their practice educators during placement. So we want to create this training and resources that reflect the insights of both groups of people. So we have received ethical clearance for this study, which is great. And we will be running focus groups with 2 different groups of participants, so our practice educators and our students. We've already started our data collection for our speech pathology students. But speech pathologists, we need you. So we are looking for speech pathologists who are working in Australia, who have supervised and completed Compass assessment with at least 1 student from any university in Australia. And you have to be willing to participate in an online focus group with around 4 to 6 other speech pathology practice educators. It's only 60 minutes. You can register your interest by scanning the QR code that you can see on the screen, and we'll be running the focus groups in November. And I almost want to keep this slide up just for a few more seconds. So you can contact us via our email addresses, but that is just a really quick snapshot into what we are planning on doing. And I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Thanks.
Amanda, do you want to just put your QR code up? Because somebody said there's no QR code on the screen, so maybe go back to that just for a second. We have, thank you so much.
I'd love to leave it.
You finished within your time, so we can afford to leave that there for a little bit longer.
Thanks.